Hi, and welcome to the Animal Training Academy podcast show, the show for animal training and behaviour nerds, where I, Ryan Cartledge, interview the world's most proficient animal training and behaviour geeks. We're absolutely thrilled and grateful to have you here with us today. So make sure you hit that subscribe button on whatever you're listening to this on so that you don't miss a single episode. Each episode of this show is brought to you on behalf of the ATA membership. And if you like the conversations in this episode, then you're invited to continue them with like-minded behaviour nerds within the membership area, which you can find out more about at www.animaltrainingacademy.com. You'll get access to twice monthly live web classes, the back catalogue of previous web class replays, plus a huge library of videos and projects to help problem solve your training challenges. Plus, we're a sociable bunch with an exclusive private Facebook group and forum areas. It's like a Netflix social media platform for animal behaviour geeks. But we will start today's episode where we're once again super excited to welcome two special guests on this one. Returning to our show as the reigning champion of the most featured guest of all time on the ATA podcast, none other than behaviour nerd extraordinaire Eva Bertilsson. And joining us for the first time is a favourite colleague of both of ours, a long-time ATA member, highly experienced, hardworking, and a super dedicated learner also from Sweden, the wonderful Angelica Hesselius. Eva has a master's degree in behaviour analysis and a passion for everything related to behaviour, learning and animal welfare. Together with business partner Emily Johnson-Vey, Eva runs a collaborative Carpe Momentum, teaching seminars on the general principles of behaviour and learning and coaching trainers in the art of structuring great training sessions regardless of the venue or the species. Eva is a board member of the Swedish Association for Behaviour Analysis, a faculty member of Clicker Expo, and an enthusiastic disseminator of ethical practices based on behaviour science. In addition to her teaching, she's also been instrumental in introducing Tag Teach and Fear Free in Scandinavia. Eva loves networking and connecting people and ideas, and she hosts the yearly CCC conference on choice, control and communication in her hometown on the west coast of Sweden. Angelica is an internationally renowned reward-based horse trainer with a background as an instructor in classical dressage and academic art of riding. She specialises in positive reinforcement training for balanced movement in groundwork and riding. She is developing proprioception, movement and communication through systematic reward-based strategies. Angelica trains horses, teaches students and coaches colleagues all around the world. She's developed new strategies for creating high precision movements and low frustration from the get-go when working with food reinforcers. She's part of the Swedish Instructor Collaboration, OHR+, and has been teaching dressage since 2010, and with a positive reinforcement approach since 2016. It's her passion to guide horses and riders towards high balance, find connection and collection together with a horse that loves to train as much as you do. Eva and Angelica's current projects include exploring Nuances, with lectures and courses for horse trainers and behaviour geeks curious to explore and expand their training systems, like you, the podcast listener. So without further ado, it's my very great pleasure to welcome Eva and Angelica to the show today, who are both patiently waiting by in Sweden. Hey, thank you so much to both of you for taking the time to come and hang out with us again, because you've both done stuff with us at ATA before, even though with Angelica it's been stuff within our membership. So thank you for making time to come and hang out with us again at Animal Training Academy.
Hey, thanks for having us.
I love that. Hey, you're so welcome. And let's dive in to the first part of what's going to be a two-part episode. Now, for those who want to learn more about Eva's story, I encourage you to venture way back to what would be episode 46 from November 2018, That's when Eva and I first met, and I found my guru, jokes aside. I do encourage you to listen to that one. We talk about flowcharts, and it was so much fun. Today, though, I'm really excited to learn more about your story, Angelica, and to share that with our listeners. So I was hoping you could please take everyone listening back to where you first learned about animal training and share some stories with us from your journey.
Well, I started really early with horses, but I think my positive reinforcement journey started like somewhat 10, 12 years ago or something like that. And I mean, we share Eva as a guru. She has been a really important part of my evolvement as a trainer. So I'm really happy to share this podcast with Eva today. And yeah, when I actually started with positive reinforcement training with my horses, I was already training and teaching both student and other horses. And I think that highly affected how I did the strategies I used when I did change. And I've always been kind of curious in how different trainer works, even then. And with my first horse, Koppar was my really first horse that we really experienced with positive reinforcement training techniques. It wasn't, I had 3 horses back then. I did a bit different with everyone, but with him, I tried to change everything at once and just drop the old ways of working and switch over to positive reinforcement technique, which, I wasn't successful at all in the beginning. And we had a lot of newbie problems, I guess, with frustration and him not really knowing what I expected. And I not really knew what I was going to teach either. It was kind of lucky for me. I love that to have that experience with him. But it was somewhat lucky for me also that I had 2 other horses that I could approach a bit different with. And for me, the most what I learned from that time was really to go about things different, and I've been ever since. Even though my techniques, of course, has changed. Basically, the ABCs was taught a bit different then, and I did not really fully grasp, even though maybe it was hidden in plain sight, the contingencies. Because when I started to get more into that, and also when one of the first talks I heard with Eva was from one reinforcer to the next. And just to get to know the behavior cycle in full really, really changed how my first horse, how this changed our relationship so much. So from that part, we could really dive into what actually, for me, it's one thing to say that, it's only adding stuff after behavior or withdrawing stuff, it's mathematical terms. But when you start to get into the continuouses, that actually the continuouses will reflect in the horse's emotions as well. That's when I started to be a much better trainer for my horse. Yeah.
I was curious what was happening before 2016. Where did you first become? The word interested is coming to my mind, but it's not the word I'm looking for. Where did you first start to work with horses? Did you grow up with horses? How did you get into horses to start with?
Well, I grew up next to. I have a big family, many siblings. We really couldn't afford horses for just me. So I spent most of my years growing up in my neighbor's stable. She had harness racing horses of different breeds. And I think that's maybe from my early journey, one of the most influential people in my whole life, I feel. And she was a great teacher. I can't remember she ever told me that I did something wrong. She was really show, not tell, show me how it was done. And I was expected to learn from that, which I did. And I really appreciate everything I learned from her. And I've gathered tons of experience from very many horses. And it all went from there, and I started to go to high schools with the specialty of riding, and went a bit of that. And I also tried some that's when my love for dressage started to grow, and also my love for biomechanical movement and sort of the nuances of how horses move and how small the difference can be from what is actually building up or from what is maybe not so beneficial in the long run. So I've been on a lot of things. I also did drive, I don't know how you say that, you drive in the forest with heavier type of draft horses, and you basically bring wood out from the forest to the whatever. I have no idea what it's called, but that was also such a great time in my life. And after that, some riding educations, and I started to really get into classical dressage and academic art of riding. Also why I in the first place opened my eyes a bit for positive reinforcement was at a long-reining clinic in Sweden organized by Carolina Fransson, a Swedish horse trainer and, a colleague to both Eva and mine. And she was super early training positive reinforcement with horses in Sweden. And she organized this clinic, and it was the first time I met her, and the first time I ever saw something different. But I actually had problems understanding what I was seeing because I was viewing it from my previous lens. But that's where it started, so to speak. A short version.
And shout out to Carolina Fransson. She's a long-time ATA member as well. I was curious, I'm glad you brought that in about how you first came across positive reinforcement. So you went to Carolina's workshop clinic. You saw what happened next. How did you take this confusing new approach and make sense of it?
Yeah, actually, it wasn't her. She was organized with a Dutch, very lovely, more traditional trainer. But a lot of the attendees at the clinic did positive reinforcement, which, to be honest, it was in a clinic setting. So I assume they adapted it a bit to work like that. And positive reinforcement training also, at least the one I saw in Sweden, looked a bit different from nowadays. I think the horse training side has evolved so much from how it was applied back then and what we see in Sweden today. But I met Carolina there and we talked a bit, and I went to her for some lectures and started to pick up some concepts with my horse Koppar, and she was, of course, really, really important for how my training, which dialect I evolved. And I couldn't be more happy than to start my training with her and later with Eva. So that has, of course, shaped me a lot.
Yeah, look, I know there's a lot of horse trainers that listen to this podcast. It's not the species that I have spent a significant amount of time in, although coming from a zoo background, working with so many different species, I know the universality of the principles, so I've never questioned ever working with horses with positive reinforcement. Now, I'm looking at the time frame here and saying 2016 to now is six years. And then we were fortunate to have you come and present and offering a learning opportunity for our ATA members with Eva earlier this year. And when I'm watching you work with the horses, it's just like watching magic. I know it's not magic. It's all contingencies and it's all really well practiced and fluent mechanics. But I'm curious to dig deeper here. What is your appetite for learning? How do you approach seeing new information and putting it into practice? Because 6 years to go from first learning about positive reinforcement to what I saw in that webinar was phenomenal.
Oh yeah, no, I did start teaching positive reinforcement 2016.
But you saw it early. Yes.
I was practicing. I don't know, some years, 4 or 5 years before I started teaching it. I was actually training myself. And teaching has been such a huge part of, teaching others has been such a huge part of my own development. I'm a huge practical trainer. I love training. I'm really, to dive deeper into the nuances of training, I think I always want to try it out in practice. And I'm really, but it's one thing, theory is great, but for me, that I can actually apply it and make use of it. And my interest in physically sound movements has really shaped how I approach posture reinforcement as well. Because the first thing I started to do with my horses was to start to find new ways of, because all my horses back then, and also if it goes with every horse, of course, needs some kind of balance training in some sense, but I really early started to look for techniques, so I didn't have to rely on teaching the behavior in full to be able to use it, or teaching final cues. That's why I'm big on shaping with the environment setups as well. So sort of trying it practically is really where I feel I learn the most. And I think that's also the thing with working with Eva now, has also been such a organic process of exploring, which, well, suits me very well.
You know, Ryan, there was something in what you just said that got me started thinking, related to Angelica's work with horses before starting, like diving into posture reinforcement. And we know positive reinforcement training works with all species. We're working with all sorts of species and venues. But how does it connect to what you did like before with horses? And I grew up with horses as well, and I've been thinking quite a lot now that I've been diving deep into working with horses so much again, of how many different traditional versions there are. It's like there's so many different styles and strategies of horse training. Sometimes I think we make it sound like it's one, but it's so diverse. And I'm thinking, Angelica, the type of horse training that you were doing, like you're saying, you were focusing so much on movement, but for somebody who isn't that familiar with, maybe for somebody who is familiar with horse training, like you would explain it in one way. And for somebody who isn't familiar, you would explain it in another way. And I'm thinking maybe it could be helpful for all our listeners to get a little bit more of, okay, the type of, because this is something that I have been asking or exploring also in our meeting, is like, what do I have with me with my horse background? Where are you coming from in your horse background, and how does it all come together with the posture reinforcement training we're doing? That was a lot at once. Sorry.
No, I'm grateful to you for that, Eva. That is everyone why Eva is our most featured guest, because she understands you, the audience, and she's picking out questions that I was going to ask, but asking them even better than I would have. Over to you, Angelica.
Yeah, okay. The first thing is, well, if we start with dressage, yeah, I am a huge dressage nerd. What I consider to be dressage, it's just training a horse to be sound, to be better at being a horse, and if we want to ride a horse, that's one thing, but of course, how I see it, the horse benefits a lot from being a better individual, whether we choose to ride the horse or not. I do a lot of riding from the ground as well, and I'm really focusing on balance in all direction, emotional balance, physical balance between behaviors as well. So if you take a simple thing as doing, if you want to ride out in the forest, just trail riding, to prepare a horse for an act like that can successfully be done at the riding arena to make the horse more able to carry weight, for example, and to make turns easy, and to have the weight equal behind both the sides of the horse, and both the front and back, and the kind of overall balance for the horse. And yeah, we know that this is a huge topic, a very holistic topic. It includes not only physical health. So, most horse people, I guess, is also experienced or interested in hoof balance as well. You have to take care of the teeth, everything works together. So looking at it from that angle, I think the part I play is just a small part of the whole, but to really try to make a difference where we can, and to set the horse and the rider up for a bit of better success in overall balance. And it doesn't have to be fancy dressage movement at all. Dressage is intended to make the horse better of being a horse. And for me, that is the sole aim for doing anything. I don't know, did I even answer your question?
I think that is what passion talking could be operationalized as. So you've done perfect. I'm curious to unpack the word balance a bit more. I'm pretty sure I heard you earlier say emotions come out of contingencies, and my understanding and some neurons in my brain lit up. You said balance is part of the emotions, it's part of the actual physical balance. But for the listeners of this podcast, can you unpack it all a little bit more? When you're talking about balance, and when you're talking about balance in all of these areas, what does that look like? How do you think about these things?
Well, I can only, I'm going to refer to Eva here also because the latest updated version of me does use a lot of Eva and Emily's Carpe Momentum's vocabulary in that direction. And I do have to mention attitude, direction, and precision. And that's really how I see it now. And that for me, relaxation can be a part of the attitude when I use it, at least, Eva. And for me, that will have to guide all the decisions I'm making. That is part of the emotional balance. To have a horse doesn't mean that we don't have energy or something like that, but to have balance, that also goes for how to balance a session. And nowadays, to start with, not even before the horse has a trained behavior repertoire, to start with hanging out on the riding arena, to really just help the horse to find reinforcers in the environment, and to really go for a pause setting that might be an easy word to use, that the horse actually can pause together with his human before you start any training. That's one part. And when we have that, direction is for me very movement related. In which direction does the behavior go? All behavior has a direction, and if we can help our horse be clearer on that direction, we do affect the horse's attitude by a mile. And really those two go hand in hand, attitude and direction. So for me, that is part of what creates emotional and physical balance, to help the horse with direction. We all know, I think, that when we feel out of balance physically, that can make us insecure, not relaxed at all, and tensed overall. And so I feel that both emotional and physical balance goes very much hand in hand, and you can develop one with the help of another and vice versa. Okay, then we have precision. Yeah, I'm so looking forward to hear your input after this. And then we have precision, because for me, most of my students, I would say, come to me for precision aspects of behaviors. They are looking for help, use my observation skill to get more nuances of movement. That's basically it. But for me, it doesn't make sense, or we're not doing the horse such a favor. Well, sometimes, for sure, precision can add to relaxation in some setting, for sure. But if we're going for precision, as in more advanced behavior, more nuances of said behavior before we have a baseline of the attitude, then I think have to reconsider. Yeah.
There's so many things coming together in all of this, in terms of it's all behavior. Like, it's not physical balance and movement is one thing and behavior is another. Behavior is movement through time and space, right? And when we talk about like emotional balance, physical balance, what we're looking at is whatever we can observe, and how that all comes together, and how we prioritize, like that attitude, direction, precision, list of priorities, whatever labels we use for it, but having some kind of list of priorities and knowing what to look for in those. It's a topic we could spend so many more years diving deeper and deeper and deeper into, and it's pretty much what we've been doing also. So
yeah, and I think also when you're teaching something to other human beings, it's such an easy way to go out and have a baseline strategy for how to set up your session. And also for me, the idea to not having to train a behavior repertoire to get to a nice attitude, let's air quote that, but to really teach the horse, the animal, to find reinforcers, not only through me as the trainer, for me, that is making the horse independent. And independent from me as the only way to gain reinforcer. And for me, that's also a prerequisite for the horse is actually saying no, because then there is actually a behavior in the background that the horse can use. Instead of saying no with leaving the training area, which sort of implies that there's aversives going on in my training. Because if the horse doesn't have a different trained behavior with positive reinforcement to return to, you all know where this is going. But for me, that is also one of the aspects of that.
So degrees of freedom would definitely be one possible way to think of that in terms of how many different ways are there to reach the same reinforcers, to put it very superficially simply. And just everything we're talking about in terms of all the welfare measures that we can come up with, and what we're talking about as providing a variety of choices, both through measured through degrees of freedom and with other choice or control measures and with other welfare measures. What you're talking about, Angelica, in providing many different ways, many different possible parallel contingencies is such a huge thing in just providing a living environment. Not only a teaching environment, but like starting from a living environment and then narrowing it into a teaching environment. But maybe that is one of the biggest thing that we've seen develop in the positive reinforcement training, in opening up for more and more parallel positive reinforcement contingencies and making it easier and easier to access negative reinforcement without losing access to positive reinforcement at the same time.
Exactly, well said. I think that's also exactly what you said here, but what I see in the horse world is for sure that has been such a huge, wonderful impact of the rest of the animal training world, that has traveled really well. And I think that the challenges we have with training horses, well, reflect so well in how to build that up, that what you just said, because the horse is a grazer, he can eat basically forever, and it's really, really nice and such a huge investment, both in the overall balance, but also in, I mean, you're looking for safe training, I think that's where you should look too.
Awesome. We are going to unpack all of this even more over this and the subsequent episode, but I'm someone who is just fascinated by people's stories and where they've come from and how they got to where they are. And there's other parts of your story that I'm curious about. And so I'm going to dive back into some things we were talking about earlier. And you mentioned that you were getting into the academic art of riding. And I realized I don't know what the academic art of riding is. Can you talk a little bit more about that for the listeners of this show?
Sure. It's founded by Bent Brandrup. He's a Danish horse trainer, and the main idea is that the dressage is for the horse, and that the horse should be a willing partner of doing work together with the rider. The academic part, I mean, how horses was worked on the riding academies from when horses were schooled to war, at the horses were working as war and did high school movements when there were more man-to-man fight, to recreate some of the cultural heritage with how dressage was practiced back then, but with a new, better lens, how we actually treat horses today, of course.
Are we now talking of like what we would see at those old Baroque paintings and things like that?
Yeah, and well, today's dressage, Piaffe and Passage might be that's where the education stops. Maybe it doesn't. Here it goes to the school jumps and a bit more of things that we don't have so much use for nowadays when we do not fight each other. And I mean, in all honesty, also like to have a good working horse that can move in all directions and is physically balanced, it's of course also a huge thing. But I mean, what academic art of riding is very good at, and why it still really, really interests me, is the continuous evolvement in the academy itself. It consists of, I think we are like 200 people in Europe. every year there's a trainer meeting and a topic that all the trainers there dive deep into, and you're supposed to study it during the year and bring your thoughts around the subject. And there's a lot of recreating and a lot of new different ways of working, which I found very, very easy to adapt into my positive reinforcement training, and very systematical. Some of the ways are really, really where we are in space in relation to our horse makes a lot of sense from the academic art of riding techniques and from my view of how to create balance. And the way I'm working with feeding a lot in movement. Also, I have brought in a lot of those techniques, how to work from the ground with my horses and being able to have a super high rate of reinforcement in those movements. So I think for me, it has been a great marriage and I still learn a lot from movement-related topics, and of course the overall how to view behavior, how to view movement, and getting higher observation skills. For me, that is how you become a good trainer. How you fix your timing, your reinforcement rate, your everything. I think comes down to being good at observed movement. Because if you can't observe movement, you can't reinforce them. So all that I find now I sort of dived from the subject here, but yeah.
So, sorry, Eva, did you want to share something?
I'm thinking there is something about the benefits that you're sort of taking with you from the more traditional horse training that is a good reminder for us all. In just because it's not positive reinforcement trained, because it isn't traditional, it's negative reinforcement based, but there's still so much value within it to bring over. I'm guessing that it can be easy to watch horse training, more traditional horse training, and definitely dressage training, and quite possibly also the more academic style of dressage, and say, nope, don't like it, negative reinforcement, don't like it, and then not look any further, like to miss all the benefits. Which would be really unfortunate, I'm thinking. And it's so massive in the horse training. There's so much nuances.
So massive. And I think what you said earlier also about reaching out to different trainers and sort of learn from each other also ties so much into there. And I think for me, I take lessons from Bent, and he has great observation skills. They go out online, and he's very observation skills. For me, if I can understand that people can feel a bit vulnerable putting themselves in a situation where they have a teacher working with a different system, but to go there without your horse and to observe movement might be a good idea for very many people. And a lot of my students, of course, there are not too many people yet that teach dressage and has a positive reinforcement background. We are, of course, becoming more and more, but I mean, there's still a lack of us. So of course, people don't also have the options to teach with someone. If they want to work with dressage movement, stuff like that, they are bound to work with a negative reinforcement trainer. And I think it's really important to have an open discussion. And maybe it's not the first thing you should do. You should be really comfortable with your training first, I think. But to have an open discussion, I think trainers that are interested in teaching and exploring teaching would be interested in actually having this discussion with you. And I find I have a lot of great discussions with trainer that chooses to train very different from me.
It is a bit about differentiating the goal with your training from the method of that training. So you're taking a lot of valuable behavioral movement and balance goals, like behaviors to look for, behaviors to build for, movements and transitions to work with, and then figuring out, well, how can I do this with positive reinforcement? Like, should I do this? Is this what I want to do? And how can I do it with positive reinforcement? And that's so cool. That is so cool.
And I think also it depends, like you said earlier, there's such a variety. Of course, you have to, some level, you have to be content with how the training looks to have an open discussion. Also, I think you have, But yeah, apart from that, I think it's, for me personally, I think it's very important for myself. In the beginning, I lacked a bit of how I trained, and how new students came to me. They felt like there was something wrong with them when they were doing posture reinforcement and dressage, and to be a bit more open to what students want and students' needs. Of course, that goes for itself, but to be a bit more welcoming also with a student that starts on a very different level and maybe keeps a bit of the old training for a while with the transfer period, and to really be open to try to meet people where they're at. I feel that's a huge benefit for the community as whole, because training and our possibility to apply our new technique might be limited in some setting. I mean, I'm very privileged to have the horses at my house, and I can set up how my training look 100% of the time, and maybe someone else is not that lucky.
Yeah, there's no way you could be where you're at today if you didn't have the background that you have, could it?
Definitely not. Definitely not.
I'm thinking that's even the same for me. And I haven't been continuing with the horses through my adult life, but like the dressage, having a dressage background, I hadn't thought about that much before we got started, like how enormously that has influenced all my work with animals, and where
I have thought about
seamlessness
that
sort of. I know you've been thinking about that. We'll get back to that later, but it feels like there is something so important in this academic art of riding dressage parts of you, that it's not just, oh, that's my background, that's what I did before. It's still a part of who you are, and it's currently also a part of who I am.
It definitely is. And I think also before I started training with posture reinforcement, I think I already trained students back then, and I have already successfully helped horses to better emotional and physical balance. I mean, looking at it now, maybe I wouldn't be happy about it, but I was for sure really happy about it then, and that made a huge difference in some of my horses' life already. So I think we have to also remember that part where we came from, and that we still was trying to help horses.
Yes.
I like how this whole conversation started by you saying the updated version of Angelica. Post meeting Eva and Emily, I feel the same, by the way. But you chose the word marriage there, and I really like that. You know, marriage is something that takes compromise. Marriage is a lifelong commitment. Marriage is something that takes continual growth. Marriage is something where there's highs, but there's also lows, and I imagine, I think it's for me, it resonates as a good metaphor to talk about bringing your own learning together, as you have done, what you've learned in the past and what you're doing now, but also embracing others and meeting them where they are, which I'm taking away from what you're saying, is a great skill that you have as a teacher, at meeting your student where they are. Your class, your moment with that student, offering them your observation skills is for them just an approximation, and potentially sometimes we have too much expectations that an approximation for that learner attending your class is going to have such a huge lump, a huge behavioral change in them. But what I'm taking away from what you're saying is we just need to be a little bit more patient, as we are with our horses and our dogs, that these moments of learning for each individual human, no matter where they are just approximation. Is anything I've said just made sense?
It resonates a lot, actually. And I think the nowadays I'm meeting a bit more student that has more posture reinforcement concept in their toolbox already. But I think it's one of my passions for future work is really to make this a bit more mainstream. So for sure, I'm meeting a bit of different students now, that is for sure. But to try to meet people where they're at is, of course, always the greatest challenge for us that tries to teach other people doing stuff together with animals. And for me, the independence that I'm looking for in my horse, high independence, low frustration, well, of course, that goes for the students as well. And I want to make the student independent, more independent on a higher level as we go. and that of course takes time. And sometimes I do think I am too fast in like, oh, this is going great, I think you can maybe do a bit on your own, and the student doesn't have that same feeling that I have, because I often see, okay, I see the horse also in the future when I'm looking at it, I see the potential, and both with the potential of the student and the horse, and I see, this is going to be so great. But I think it's also important, of course, to stay with it. Then the patience that you mention is so important, and something that I need to remind myself on, because I'm very eager to encourage people and horses to be more independent, and they of course also has to be ready for this.
I think Eva was sharing her interpretation of what she was hearing from you, and she was saying something that was so great about your journey is you were asking, how can I? So injecting a little bit of curiosity in there as well. I'm picking up from what you're sharing has been a big part of your journey. You've been curious and you've allowed yourself to get vulnerable. Is me saying that resonate with you? Does that sound correct with how you would view your own journey?
Yeah, maybe I'm super curious for sure, but I don't think I feel vulnerable in that sense, because I feel I'm more curious. The curiosity is so strong. So even if I get a blank no from some people and they don't want to share with me or stuff like that, I just like, okay, let's see if I find someone else. So I have never felt vulnerable about sharing my work. I do try to share a lot from my process with my horses as well. I don't think vulnerability is the right word for it like that, because that's not, there is vulnerability to it, but there's more curiosity and willingness to see to get feedback and to change and to be better.
I picked up vulnerability from earlier in the conversation, and so I've connected dots in places that dots were meant to be connected. So I've got my join the dots diagram in front of me. I'm erasing that and I'm trying to find the correct dot to join it to. You're talking about vulnerability in regards to people who have set learning history, and tell me if I've corrected the correct dot here. Finding it challenging when they see something that they might find confronting. This person is using negative reinforcement, whatever that looks like. To be able to go into that space, let their walls down, and invite new information. And this is all resonating with me because I'm taking LLA with Susan at the moment, and she's talking about how challenging it can be for people to really build skill at a multidisciplinary approach, because it's hard to take off your glasses from whatever level of analysis you're using to some people, and to see things through another perspective. So how have you developed that skill? How do you step in front of someone, or let me phrase this question differently. What can you share? And I'm wanting to phrase this question correctly, which is why I've restarted 4 or 5 times now. I'm staying in this space for longer because we're talking about horses, and because I know a lot of our audience are struggling with being positive reinforcement trainers in terms of their community of humans around them in their local geographical areas, for example, that are also working with horses. How have you developed the skill, or what do you have to share with the audience for people that might be in that place to let those walls down and embrace those conversations and marry some of these ideas together?
Yeah, I'm not sure I have a good answer to that, actually. I'm really well. What I do when I do go to different spaces also is, I think the willingness to learn is very huge, and that goes hand in hand with my curiosity. Of course, I'm not the best at analyzing myself. I suck at that, but I think that's really a part of it, and that. Really show that you respect the knowledge that other people bring. I think it's that too, that I don't question their choices. Well, some I do, of course, but the trainer I choose to work with, I don't question their choices. I know they come from a good place. And the people I meet, we all want to do what's best for our horses, even if we don't train with the same way. And that goes for some of the dialects in positive reinforcement. We're doing this. We love horses. That's what unites us. And I think it's very important to remember that the person I meet also love their horse and want the best for their horse. Maybe their views of what's best for the horse doesn't really align with mine, but doesn't make them less true for the person, you know.
That's what unites us. We all want to do what's best for our horses. And seeing that common goal is challenging sometimes, I think, when emotions are involved. I'm curious where this whole journey has brought you now. Can you share with everyone listening what updated Angelica looks like? What are you doing in 2022?
Well, what does she do, this person? Well, I must say, after diving deep into getting a stronger dialect, that's what 2022 has been all about, in my own dialect and what I want to evolve with my horses. I kind of made, it already started with exploring rewards together with Eva, where there are some very strong, it's behavior analysis, but there's also strong dressage concept in the horse, because sort of that's a marriage too. And I sort of revert to dive deeper into that part of myself, really. And upcoming course, I'm gonna teach a course with at the core with postural balance for horses, exercises, stuff like that. And for my own training journey, I've been really with my own horses try to explore the nuances of our dressage concept in that framework, I think. And yeah, looking forward to see where we go. In as a horse trainer, I strongly feel I have a lot to evolve to, of course, but I'm still kind of happy with the person I'm becoming as of now. And I think that's a huge part of what Eva and I did last year, and some of it this year too, is made me, meeting her concept has made my own concept also grow and be stronger, I think.
And did I see that you're starting a membership soon?
Well, together with Dutch horse trainer Do Groen. Sorry, Do, for saying your name like that, but I'm trying. But that's a reward-based horse academy, that's called, and we're trying to what I've talked about before, to make training accessible for more people and to be there to support them during the process. I mean, for a longer period of time, we're building a 1-year educational program, so that's kind of a commitment. But it will be a super great baseline for you and your horse if you choose to come with it, but that's in the making as well, of course. And I'm hoping that Eva and I will get some workshop going also.
I haven't spoken to Angelica since like a month ago. So last summer we spent all summer together digitally, but still I was talking to Angelica most every day. So this summer has been like, oh my God, where is my Angelica? And do we need to get back together? So last summer was super intense in terms of us exploring what the other person was doing and what we ourselves were doing and how it all fit together, and just looking at all the details and doing that ending up with us developing the Exploring Rewards online course, which is ended up being a really comprehensive piece of material that we never set out to do that. We didn't know that in the beginning of, like in April last year, we had no idea that come November we would do a 2-week course that was very, very well structured and organized and taking things one step at a time and being comprehensive. Since the summer was neither well structured nor organized nor anything else, it was just a fabulous deep dive in us figuring out how to connect our dots, because our dots are it's like we have been working parallel without connecting with one another, but doing each other's things. I have been taking my old dressage stuff with me into my dog training and back into my horse training and into everything I do with movement and seamlessness and all of it. I'm seeing that more and more through talking to you. I can see my own background going into my own training. So it is a bit, I can tease out sort of one thread at a time, but as a whole, I would say that's like one massive part of it. You helping me through sharing what you do with the postural reinforcement and movement and what I will think about as dressage-y stuff for the horse. that has helped me connect how my own threads go from the horse trainer I was as a kid to the dog trainer I am today. Threads that I were not aware of, but that have been highlighted through working with you. And at the same time, I've learned a lot of new stuff from how you are working, because I've seen some of your material. And it isn't that you and I haven't spent time together before, but we haven't spent endless hour diving deep into every little detail that we do, as we did last summer.
And where can the listeners of this episode go online to find out more about this collaboration and the offerings you were just talking about?
So there is currently a sub-page at Angelica's webpage. I think that's probably the easiest way to find out about it. So reward-based art of riding, and then you look at exploring nuances. And then we have tried to collect everything that we've done, including the couple of webinars that we have, like webinar recordings up there already. And that's also what we're looking at doing, although it's not scheduled yet, during the fall this year, of doing both more webinars and hopefully also another round of the Exploring Rewards course. You can find it through my channels as well. So, but Exploring Nuances with Eva and Angelica and Eva is what you're looking for. If you find the Exploring Nuances, you'll find everything else under that.
Awesome. And we will, of course, link to that in the show notes as well. Hey, Eva and Angelica, thanks so much for sharing everything in today's episodes. Angelica, we absolutely love hearing about people's behavioral odysseys on this show. So thank you very much for sharing everything about yours.
Oh, thanks for listening. It was harder than expected to reflect.
Thank you so much, Ryan. I also kept learning more about Angelica through this episode, even though we spent all those hours last year. So that was lovely also for me to get in even more.
Well,
Angelica
I love that we have connected some dots for you, Eva, in that sense today. And I think that's going to be the name of this episode. We're going to call it Connecting the Dots with Angelica and Eva, part 1.
Perfect.
Cool.
As is our relatively new tradition here at HEA, having realised our guests, as Ava's just learnt, have so much awesomeness to share with each other and the podcast audience, you. We're going to wrap this up for now as Connecting the Dots Part 1, but we will be joined again by Eva and Angelica on a subsequent episode. It's either going to be the next one or one not long after, where they're going to share more about this collaboration that they've just briefly touched on now and how you, the listener, can benefit. For now, though, Eva and Angelica, this has been a ton of fun. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedules to hang out with me today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
We do, of course, really appreciate all of you tuning in today as well. And if you have enjoyed this episode and you were interested in carrying on the conversation about working with our animals in the most positive, funnest, choice-rich ways, then as mentioned at the start of this episode, the Animal Training Academy community is waiting for you. Head on over to www.animaltrainingacademy.com and click on the membership button in the main menu to learn more about what members are describing as the Netflix social media platform for behavior geeks. That's it for this episode though. We're going to wrap it up there. Thanks again so much everyone for listening. You'll hear from us again soon.